And for that reason, this training is mandatory for all of our scholarship selection volunteers. Before we begin today, just a few quick reminders. Please stay on mute unless you're speaking. If possible, we'd love to see your faces on camera, so feel free to turn your cameras on. And also feel free to submit questions in the chat at any time. We have a few of our volunteers and staff manning the chat, so we'll try to address those before the session ends. I want to make sure that we acknowledge that Washington State University is locations statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. WSU Pullman is located on the homelands of the Nimipu, the Nez Perce tribe, and the Palouse people. The university expresses its deepest respect and gratitude towards these original and current caretakers of the region. At WSU, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of you again for volunteering your time and expertise. Your participation reflects the deep commitment to WSU, to our students, and to the broader community. Today, we're going to hear from two WSU professors who will help us learn more about bias and mitigating bias, helping us approach the scholarship selection committee process with clarity and with fairness so we can confidently choose the most deserving students. So today we have with us Dr. Chad M. Gotch. He's a scholar in educational measurement and assessment at Washington State University. Dr. Gotch's work centers on a simple but powerful idea. When assessment is done well, it empowers. When it's done poorly, it can undermine learning and sow anxiety. To that end, his scholarship spans the full life cycle of assessment, from development to use and policy. In the classroom, Dr. Gotch teaches educational statistics, educational measurement and test development, and classroom assessment at both the elementary and secondary levels. Some recent works of his include a volume, the 2025 Routledge volume, Leading Schools with Embedded Assessment Practices, and a 2025 review of educational research article on preparing teacher candidates for assessing learning. He has also advanced practices in score reporting through teacher research partnerships, examined the validation trajectory of the Washington Assessment of Risk and Needs of Students, and published widely on assessment literacy and individual level score reports. Dr. Gotch earned his PhD from Washington State in 2012, an MS from the University of Idaho in 2002, and a bachelor's from Virginia Tech in 2001. We also have joining us Dr. Amir Gilmore. He's an associate professor of cultural studies and social thought and education at Washington State. And also he's the Associate Dean of Equity and Inclusion for Student Success and Retention in the College of Education. Dr. Gilmore's interdisciplinary background spans cultural studies, Africana studies, and education. He teaches courses such as multicultural education in a global society, adolescence, community, and school, race, identity, and representation, and social theory and education, preparing educators to think critically about youth, community, and schooling. Dr. Gilmore earned his PhD in 2019 at WSU, an MA in 2015 in Africana Studies, and his bachelor's in 2011 in history from the State Universities of New York, Albany. So please join me in welcoming both of our speakers, Dr. Gotch and Dr. Gilmore. And I will go ahead and send that over to you both now. Thank you both for joining us.
Yes. Thank you. We're happy to be here. Thank you all for being here. I think there's like 70 people, so there's a lot of folks. But Chad and I are really excited to do this. And so I'm going to share my screen. I have my slides, and hopefully if I did this correctly, you'll be able to see them. So bear with me for a second.
Well, we're working on getting that up here. This is recorded and I will post it to the resources page after the meeting today and send an email with all the information. So here we go.
Okay, can everyone see everything okay?
Yeah, it's
I
showing
can.
your small screen on top of the large screen.
Yes. Hold on.
Love technology.
That's weird. Let's see like this. Okay. How about now?
Looks good.
Perfect. Okay. So we are here. Happy to be here, and we'll just kind of jump right into it. And so I think as Roxanne had already indicated that Dr. Gotch and I, we are teacher educators. We work in teacher education. And so as teacher educators, we are uniquely focused on things such as metacognition, which is really thinking about thinking, disposition. So really like why do people do the things that they do, right? And how do they, show or exhibit those behaviors? Obviously bias, because here we are talking about bias today, social awareness, and obviously thinking about multiple perspectives. These things are very necessary thinking for, obviously educating teachers, but even for today, as y'all will be scoring and looking at scholarships, it's really important that we think about who we are as people, how we see the world, and how we have differences about how we see the world. Because obviously, when we're thinking about students and we think about obviously like giving out awards and money, this is very important. So, yes. So to continue on this, why is understanding bias critical to the Alumni Association? Because it's critical to WSU. I pulled this from the strategic plan, right? And so our core belief, our third core belief is to achieve an ethically and socially just society for all. And so this is really important for us because we care, right? And so to have an ethically and socially just world, we need people to understand who they are, how they see the world, and like what are the implications of that. And so when we address bias, we also address ourselves because we are biased people. We address our thinking because sometimes our thoughts are not always the best, right? And so it's really important for us to think about who we are as people, how we think about the world, how we think about others. Also, when we address bias, we address notions of fairness because of how we are, because of our thinking, sometimes the things that we do or don't do or say or our actions, they may not always be fair. They may not always be great. And that also leads into notions of inclusion. When we address bias, we also address inclusion. And then lastly, when we address bias, we also address about differences, but not just differences, but also how we embrace differences, the importance of differences. I'm different from Chad. Chad is different from me. We're all different from each other. And that is okay. It's about how we talk about these differences, which really means a lot to us. So our objectives here today, right, are to identify and describe common rater effects that can occur when reviewing scholarship applications, and then also to accurately explain personal biases and how they influence the selection process, and tools and methods to mitigate bias when reviewing and scoring scholarship applications to ensure a fair outcome. With that, I will hand it over to Dr. Gotch.
All right, thank you, Amir. Yeah, and thank you everybody for coming out today. Sorry, I'm a little scratchy throat from a cold. I'm gonna try to get through it here. Um, so I'm gonna take up primarily that first objective and just walk through some things to get us thinking about ratings and effects that we can have as raters. So this is kind of coming from a educational measurement perspective. I've had the opportunity to work on um, gathering and evaluating evidence for some observational tools, for example, that we might use with early childhood development. And I'll bring some of that to us today, and then I'll pass the baton back to Amir to get past the surface and scratch a little deeper on the topic. So starting off with ratings. we're familiar with ratings. As I was looking through my slides here, I'm making a lot of Olympics references, so I think I must be ready for the Olympics next month. Often we see ratings in like figure skating and gymnastics and diving and those kinds of things. Um, and so bring some of that thinking to the scholarship process and thinking about like why might two judges give different scores on the same performance? So go ahead and next slide, Amir. Um, so don't mean to scare you here. I mocked up a little spreadsheet of data here where we can imagine we have ratings for scholarship applicants across three different areas that the scholarship might be looking at: leadership, academics, community service. And each applicant is being rated by three individuals. And my apologies to any math or stats folks out there for misspelling Neil of Neil Hall. Um, all I want you to do with this is I get a confirmation. I can't see anybody but me and Amir, but like one or two, you put a thumbs up in the chat if you agree that not every one of these numbers is the same. Do we see different numbers here? All right, excellent. So let's go on to the next slide, Amir. So what I'm going to introduce here is why do ratings vary? So everything that we saw on that previous slide, it wasn't all the same number. So why do ratings vary? And so we can think of two primary forces on that. Those numbers that we saw had differences, one, because there are differences between and within applicants, between, between different applicants. And I say within because we had those three different areas and, applicants might have differing levels of quality or meeting criteria across those different areas. And then ratings can also vary because of the raters. I think we've got an animation here, Amir. Fancy. So that's all right. So what I'm going to walk us through here is some of the things that can happen that are under this idea of differences between raters driving differences in the scores that we see. Okay, next slide. Um, so to flip that around, if we think about the ratings process, three general things that would give us confidence in ratings. By confidence, I mean we feel like the scores that are coming out of the rating process, the scores that we're using to drive decisions about who gets scholarships, who gets awards, who gets money, as Amir said, what gives us confidence in that process, the ratings and the process and the ratings that come out of that. And we can think of three things: accuracy, consistency, and agreement. So let's go to the next slide. So again, I'm apparently all about the Olympics. This has become one of my favorite Olympic sports the last couple times around. Next time, what did it be, 2028? Try to catch some archery. Yeah, I'd have to go in like the Peacock app and like dig way deep down to find it. But it's super fun. And it's an easy way for us to think about these ideas of accuracy, consistency, and agreement. And so I've got some visuals here. Go to the next slide, Amir. So if someone shot their arrows at the target here, and this is where they landed, um, we would say that these are accurate. They're near the center of the target, and they're consistent. They're clustered closely together. So, this archer is shooting consistently and accurately. Let's do next slide. This archer here, they're consistent. We still have that tight bundle, but not very accurate, right? They're on the target, but they're not close to that center. Next slide. Here we don't have accuracy, we don't have consistency. They're all over the place. Maybe if we kind of averaged out all of these attempts, it might be somewhere near the middle, but it wouldn't be a very meaningful representation of everything. Let's go to the next one. So then here, adding in that third piece, we've got two consistent raters, again, we have, so if we think of, these arrows representing ratings, one rater in white, they're very consistent with themselves. The other one in green, they're very consistent with themselves. Some accuracy, some of these attempts are close to that center, but low agreement. They're not landing in the same spot on that target. So I think we have an animation here, Amir. So we'll just prompt here to set up for what Amir will go through and think about what could be causing this. So when we have two raters, in this case, they seem to know what they, at least how they're seeing things. They're consistent within themselves, but not a lot of agreement with one another. Let's go into the next slide. So in addition to thinking about those broad ideas of accuracy, consistency, agreement, there's some other things that can come into the process that I want to highlight. Go ahead to the next one. Anytime you deal with people who do statistics or educational measurement, they always have to find just really unnatural ways of labeling things. So what I've got here, so now imagine these are ratings that you are giving to different applicants. So we're just thinking about like one area, one criterion right now, different applicants. And if you were under the leniency example there, and you're looking at the applications and you're giving mostly fives, maybe a four here and there, you might have had a great day. I mean, that looks like a happy day, and you're feeling really good about the future. But in terms of helping us make decisions about scholarships, these ratings are not super helpful. We don't have we don't have a way to distinguish between the applicants, really. Same thing with the severity. Maybe in this case, if you're finding that you're way at the bottom of the scale for everybody, you might need to, in both of these cases, you might need to think about, what do I need to do to get back to the center of that target? The center isn't necessarily giving threes on everything, but just thinking about how you're approaching the criterion. Next slide. Centrality, again, all threes isn't the answer either. We still have the issue here with centrality, that it's really hard to distinguish between the applicants. So if you're in that leniency, that severity, or that centrality kind of case, your ratings are not they're not being super helpful to the process. And then in this last example, extremity, here you're definitely distinguishing between applicants. And some of this is a response style. Some of us, we tend to rate more toward the center of the scale. Some of us, we go more toward the ends. But I would say in both of these cases, it's probably too much in either that direction. Too much in either direction. And with the extremity, you're distinguishing between the applicants now. But if we think about how your scores might combine with somebody else's, and maybe maybe that third person down, you thought they were better than the others that you had seen before that, you gave them a 5. And someone else also thought they were better, but they thought they were a 4 instead of a 3. Now your 1s and your 5s are causing some issue. We're getting into maybe some of that agreement and consistency pieces. Let's go to the next slide. And then another thing, last thing I'll touch on, is the idea of a halo effect. So I've mocked up two letters. Go ahead and show the next one, Amir. So here we've got a application letter. It's on letterhead, and I've kind of described it here. This application letter, it's not very strong. Maybe it was even written with some careless use of AI. It uses some impressive vocabulary, and gosh darn, it's a pretty letter. but these qualities that we're noticing could mask some lack of substance in the applicant statement. And so then this would be a positive bias caused by the halo effect. We're seeing this really nice looking letter, and it's causing us, it's pulling our ratings up. It's causing us to rate the applicant maybe more highly than they deserve. Let's do the next one, Amir. This next one, this letter strongly meets all the criteria for the award. The examples of leadership and community service are rich and tangible, but the writing isn't good. The letter's plain. Maybe there is even a typo or two. Um, these negative aspects from this letter could distract from the strong qualities of the applicant. And so then this would be a negative bias caused by the halo effect. It's pulling our ratings down because of things that maybe are not relevant to the selection. They're not scholarship criteria, for example. Okay, let's do the next slide. So then what we're hoping to achieve when we think about those two things, differences between and within applicants causing the differences in scores, or differences between raters causing the scores. Obviously, we want a lot of the differences in scores to be because of the applicants themselves and not because of the luck of, what rater they were assigned to, for example. So with that, Amir, I think I pass it right back to you.
Yes. And so if my computer wants to agree with me today, there it is. So let's play a game, nothing too challenging, right? But it's an award association game, right? So when looking at these words, what comes to mind? So the words that we have here are leader, grit, merit, hardworking, good student, and successful. So I'll give you maybe maybe I'll give you 1 minute to think about what comes to mind for these words. So take a minute. That's about a minute. Educators can be bad with teacher wait time. So I'll just move to the next slide here as you're wrapping things up. So let's share, right? And so, in the chat, you can put the answers. And so when you think of the word leader, what comes to mind? So if you could populate that into the chat, we'll start from there. Let's see what pops up here. Driven, achiever, motivated, strong, responsible, committed, listener. Oh, ASB officer. Okay. Mentor, organized, organization, inspirational, dependable, wise, academically well-rounded. I like that. Okay, okay. Persistent, inspires others to achieve. Okay. Organization. Oh, this seems like if I'm doing the discourse analysis, organization is pretty huge here. Capable, ooh, coaching, visionary, in touch with others. Okay, okay, okay. Let's do another one. Ooh, ethical. Ooh, okay, Gail, I see you ethical. We need some ethics nowadays. Let's do another one. If we were to say, merit. When you think of merit, what comes to mind? If you could put it into the chat, okay. Getting things done, worthy, earned, effort, earned, okay. Earned again, performance. What else we got? Achievement, earned, achievement, consistency, integrity, valuable, value, not monetary, but personal, absolutely. Works hard to get ahead, effort, yes, achievement, excellence, achiever, quality, honest, someone who has achieved awards and accolades, shows tremendous force. Okay, okay, okay. Now, for the last one for this, focused, educated. Okay. The last one I want y'all to put into the chat. When you think of a good student, and I'll put that in air quotes, what comes to mind? Consistent, successful, hard worker, focused, hopeful, timely, okay, high GPA. All these things are popping up quicker than I can read them. Multi-skilled, multitasker, in class, on time, curious, reliable, well-rounded, forward-thinking, knows how to prioritize, balance, doesn't complain about missed readings. Academic achievement, has an internal flame, and you can see their potential. Jim, I like that. Involved, well-rounded, depending on circumstances, not all about the grades. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Okay, we got resilient, successful future. So as you can see, I mean, as y'all are putting things into the chat here, that everyone kind of has a different understanding, or at least a different idea. There is some consistency, think about what chat is saying, right? There's some consistency, but it's kind of scattered here when we think about these words, right? And so for every word that I have given y'all, there's some consistency, but it's kind of spread, right? So these are just on words alone. So let's continue our game a little bit here. If we continue, let's stretch this out. So when looking at these words, or same words again, when looking at these words, not say what comes to mind, but I say who comes to mind. So again, I will give you a minute here to think about who comes to mind when you think about a leader, when you think about grit, when you think about merit, when you think about hardworking, being a good student and successful. Oh, oh, y'all already on it. Y'all just okay. Who we got? We got Jimmy Carter. We got a Coug. Okay, go Cougs. And we got Floyd, Barack Obama. You got Diligent, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Abraham Lincoln. Okay, dang. Okay. Oh, your late father. Okay. Oh. Ooh, someone said me. I snaps to that. Michael Bennett. Okay. Mike Leach. Ooh, okay. Oh, your son. Okay. We got Lincoln. We got Floyd, President Floyd. Okay. Oh, I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Um, so let's just say I think y'all have already put in for leader who comes to mind. When we think about grit, who comes to mind when you think about grit? And if you could put that into the chat. Oh, John Wayne. Okay, I like that. A first gen student. Oh, the pack two. John Wayne. Okay. The football team center. Kyle, I like that answer. I got Mark Kelly. Blake Gurney. Oh, Simone Biles. Someone who keeps rising, getting up, resilience. Okay. We got Cougs. We are very gritty. Oh, domestic violence survivor. Absolutely. Football staff players. Eldest daughter. Okay. Lincoln. Okay. All right. Oh, parents. Okay. George Washington. So for the last one, is a good student. So who comes to mind when you think about a good student? Oh, daughter, children, a sister, okay, a son, okay. Someone who asks questions, my dad and daughter, nephew, one student who came into the Writing Center every week, one semester, an achiever, my son as well, my husband, a resilient, hardworking student who persisted in the face of challenges, my son, Warren Buffett, okay. And well, I mean, yeah, that's true. A good student of the game. Someone who gets good grades but is involved just as much as outside of classes there, and someone who shows passion in the area and goes the extra mile to learn the why. The why is the huge gym, absolutely. Someone who finds value in any subject. My friend who works full time is completing masters and still attends community events. Yeah, absolutely. So again, from this, think and share again. Al here says that, well, one who accepts new ideas, absolutely. Someone that's open-minded. So if you can see, even just from doing this with y'all here, and thank you for participating, again, there is some consistency here. I think, again, what Dr. Gotch was saying, but obviously there's still some spread here about how people see things or interpret things. And so this is, when we think about bias, this is something really important to think about because how people see the world or the discourses of what they think about certain words are totally different from each other. Is that a bad thing? Maybe, maybe not. So this is why we're going to go a little deeper here. So thank you all for participating. So let me just keep moving. So bias, let's talk about it. It's Taco Tuesday, but I digress. So bias, if you can see here, there are 4 definitions. So even when we think about the definitions of bias, or what bias is, it's totally different. And I've given you from different sources. One is from Oxford Languages. Oxford here says prejudice in favor of prejudice in favor or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. Merriam-Webster here says an inclination of temperament or outlook, especially a personal and sometimes unreasoned judgment.
You had the
Cambridge.
time wrong. It's 12 to 1.
Are we good? Okay. We have Cambridge here that the action of supporting or opposing a particular person or thing in an unfair way because of allowing personal opinions to influence your judgment. And here, Psychology Today has bias is a natural inclination for and against an idea, object, group, or individual. It is often shared and is highly dependent on variables, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even here, when we have a definition of bias, there's some agreement, but there's still some difference here in these different definitions of bias. So it's very important to think about. Even when we describe a certain word, there's still going to be different definitions of that word. I'll go on. Right? Can we be unbiased? Usually the question I get asked as a teacher educator, and I say, we all have biases. This does not mean that it is okay. I'll just stop you there. It's important to be aware and acknowledge our bias. It's very important, right? So here at Psychology Today says, generally, no, everyone has a degree of bias. It's human nature to assign judgment based on first impressions. We all do it. Also, most people have a lifetime of conditioning by schools, religious institutions, their family of origin, and the media. So can we be unbiased? No, but it's important that we acknowledge that we have bias and we do something about it. I'll keep going. So to this, consider this core tension, and you might have heard it. Maybe you have said it. Maybe you have friends that have said it, right? I hear this all the time within education, right? That I don't use labels. I just see people as people. I don't care whether they're black, white, polka dotted, or purple. That might be an issue here, right? Because if you're not seeing people for who they are, you may not be seeing certain things that they go through, right? You may not be seeing them in the most accurate light. So that might be an issue. So I'll keep on going. Sometimes I get asked, can biases be good? And I say, as a professor, sometimes. They're very contextual. Psychology Today says that some biases are positive and helpful, like choosing only to eat foods that are considered healthy or stay away from someone who has caused harm. But, and I bolded this, but biases are often based on stereotypes rather than actual knowledge of an individual or a circumstance. So can they be good? Sometimes, depending on the context, but most times that biases are based on stereotypes. And this is why we need to be cognizant of our biases because some can be rooted in stereotypes, which are not great. What causes people to be biased? Many things, even not even on this list here, but a few would be parents, obviously, friends, culture, cultural background, media. Think about traditional forms of media, also social media, institutions, i.e. like a school, religious institutions, politics, because let's not go there, but anyway. Starting at a young age, people will discriminate between those who are like them, their in-group, and those who are not like them, their out-group, right? On the plus side, they can gain a sense of identity and safety. However, taken to the extreme, this categorization can foster a us versus them mentality and lead to harmful prejudice. So this is why it's really important for us to understand our biases, because of when we take things to the extreme, what can happen. To tie this back even into Chad's notions of like reliability for raters, um, it's important that we understand who we are about and how we assess people, because even when we think about how we assess people, it's going to look a lot different. If we take certain things to the extreme, maybe our grades come out to the extreme. So it's really important that we know who we are, and how we identify as biased individuals, because it does matter when we do things like scoring. You might be asking, what kind of forms of bias are out there? And I'm like, well, here's a few. Again, a few. We have conscious bias, which is also known as explicit bias. This type of bias is the one that you are aware of. This bias is happening consciously. It's the one that you know that you're being biased and acting with intent. An individual with conscious bias is likely to be explicit in their beliefs and attitudes and behave with clear intent. This type of bias typically leads to one to discriminate against people, or groups of people. There's usually malicious intent involved in conscious biases. Unconscious biases is where people get a little tripped up at. So I'll just read it here. Unconscious bias is also known as implicit bias. It is a very different bias than conscious bias for several reasons. Unconscious biases are beliefs and attitudes that operate outside a person's awareness and control. Unconscious bias can be in direct contrast with the beliefs and values you think you hold. You may not even be aware that you hold these biases or that they are affecting your attitudes and behaviors. Unconscious biases are difficult to identify. They may influence your actions and behaviors more than conscious biases without realizing it. This is really important for y'all to think about as, reviewers and raters and scorers for scholarships. And so if you're not aware of the biases that you hold and you're grading people, obviously that can really affect and shape how you grade the grade that you give. So it's really important to think about, like, yes, what kind of conscious biases do I hold? But you may not be aware of the unconscious biases that you will hold. So this is why it's really important as scorers to really get together and talk about the scores, talk about why you gave the scores that you gave, to really talk about like, maybe I didn't see it that way, or maybe I do hold this bias, or I didn't see your point here. So this is why when we have discussions and we discuss the differences, this is really, really important. I'll continue. We have other biases that are here, like I'll just say cognitive bias, which includes mental shortcuts that lead people to reach erroneous conclusions. Examples include confirmation bias, right? Overconfidence bias. We also here have gender bias when someone is treated differently based on their gender identity, whether consciously or unconsciously. Common examples include paying women lower salaries than men for equal positions and preferential treatment given to male employees. We also have racial bias, which is a form of discrimination based on race, ethnicity, or nationality. It includes negative attitudes and stereotypes regarding individuals who belong to certain racial ethnic backgrounds and can result in lower levels of education, healthcare, wealth, and other areas of life. To continue, we have other biases. We have political bias, right? We have anchoring bias. We have stereotyping bias. We have confirmation bias, which is also huge, right? I think the slide before talked about it, which refers to placing too much value or findings that support pre-existing beliefs without considering any opposing evidence that could potentially derail those beliefs. A lot of confirmation bias happens when we have an idea and we go to Google with a question, because Google will usually give us what we want to know and hear ourselves. So sometimes running to Google is not always the best thing. The halo effect, obviously, Chad here has already talked about the halo effect, right? The last one that we have here is the availability bias, and I'll just read it here. Occurs when we make decisions using only the most available data, like Google, instead of considering like alternative examples that may have more relevance to our decision. For instance, instead of doing extensive research regarding a particular stock market trend before investing money in it, you might use your instincts solely as they are more readily available than reliable research reports regarding such investments. So I know this was a mouthful to kind of take in, especially during an hour during the lunch, right? But how and why is any of this important? Two professors just yapping at you for an hour. You might have questions, which is fair. Simply, right? If you had to take away all that I've been yapping about, what me and Chad have been yapping about, biases shape our everyday life and can shape extremely important decisions. Therefore, the effects of bias can be far-reaching. Bias comes in many forms, overt and subtle, right? From workplace discrimination based on gender or race to political partisanship that discounts science. There are countless examples of bias manifesting in our everyday life. Bias can also shape who is deserving and undeserving of awards, support, and opportunity. So moving to the question of, right, because obviously you will be scoring, right, these applications, which students deserve more opportunities and why? So we move into the question about inequality. And this is something that's really important for y'all to consider, right? Who deserves what? How is that decided? And how is that shaped? And so this is within education, especially teacher education, this is something that we talk about a lot, the inequality that happens, especially within our education and our society. So when we think about inequality, I like to really get it down to the notion about cleaning your lenses. So those that, I don't know, so think about if you have glasses, right? If you put a smudge on it, there's oil on it, you can't really see, right? And so when we think about bias, think about bias as a smudge on glass, right? When you have bias, you cannot always see people in the right way, in the right lens, or how they appear. So it's very important that we clean our lenses of bias so we can actually see people the way that they meant to be seen. And so it's really important for us, again, to know who we are, how we are biased, but it's also important for us to clean our lenses so we can see the people that we need to see. So thinking about this, right? So a great example. So say if you see somebody and you don't know all the information, but you make a judgment about them, you might need to stop yourself because those have great consequences. So I'll just read it here. When we have underinformed explanations have serious consequences for students, how they are treated, and how they feel about school themselves. Just kind of give you an example, right? In the school context. So if we think about this for a scholarship context, if you don't have all the information about a student, you might need to stop yourself from making an underinformed explanation about who they are. You should be more curious instead of actually making a statement or an explanation about who they are. Because really, to be honest, none of us have all the information about a person. So before you make an underinformed explanation, you should stop yourself because you're probably not seeing the student in a full light with full vision, right? So in this notion, it's also important for you to, right, to think about how your lens shape opportunities. We all have lenses, right? We all have bias. And so again, it's important for us to clean that lens, right? But how you make sense of something or how you see something also shapes someone's opportunity, right? In this regard, we're talking about scholarships, we're talking about money, right? So if a student doesn't get a scholarship because of how you see a student, how does that shape their life? How does that shape their opportunities that they might receive or may not receive in future contexts? So if we had to maybe, I guess, move from the personal and take a little step back to maybe a bigger level, right? It's to think about the opportunity context when we think about lenses and we think about bias as well, right? Opportunity context shape U.S. students' outcomes over time. So when we think about having conversations about inequality, right, it's also important to know that inequality of opportunity and outcome takes shape over generations. Inequality of opportunity and outcome takes shape across domains like health, housing, employment, and obviously schooling. And that also inequality of opportunity and outcome takes shape over the everyday life of a child. So again, when we think about bias and why we are having this conversation, is that bias shapes so many people's lives. And if you're not conscious of the bias that you have, you might be shaping a lot of people's lives and you would have no context that you are shaping their lives. And how do these decisions are shaped over generations between people and groups? So one thing I like to have folks think about, all right, is there a claim about a student's opportunity and outcomes that you have heard in education or in community that you know that is suspect that oversimplifies processes that are actually more complicated? What's one's aspect of a young people's lives and opportunity context that you suspect folks need to investigate more to have more thorough explanations? So just again, something for y'all to think about, especially when you grade and you come back to have a discussion about your scores. Are there certain things that you might think like, wow, this is kind of like overly simplified, right? We might need to take a more nuanced approach to really understanding the opportunity of the student, like who the student is, what they have been through. So again, it's really important for us to kind of like really think through that. Strategies that you can use, right, when we think about bias and how to mitigate bias is, right, to talk about each action in an opportunity context, and how it contributes to a student's outcome over time, kind of like a snowball, right? It is also important for you as a rater to really develop an asset perspective for students that you're reviewing, right? Do not have a deficit approach. Do not talk about what they do not have. Talk about what they have and what do they bring to the table, who they are as a person. So that's really, 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 really important. I'm looking at time and you might have questions. So I'll just have a few more slides and we can cut it there. And I'd love for Chad and I to maybe answer any questions that you have. Lastly, here that I want to talk about, which is really important when we think about bias, is culture, right? The thing that we all have. We are all cultural beings, right? And so it's really important for us to go from shallow to deep culture when we think about being a reviewer and like think about how our culture or how we see things shapes our bias. Give me a sec. Perfect. So common scripts, might have heard this before. You might have seen it on TV. You might have people have talked about it, but these are just it's a common script, right? So please do not kill me as a messenger, right? Might have heard someone say that Asian parents care about education, so Asians achieve highly. You might have heard Black and Latino parents really don't care about education, so their kids don't achieve. Whoa. What's the issue with that, right? These might be some underinformed assumptions that people are making, and how these underinformed assumptions might have grand implications about the people that you see every day. We have to be very careful of what we say about people. So to go on here about shallow culture. Shallow culture, right? These scripted cultural claims are shallow because they are so simplistic and contain little data, even if they become what Gloria Latson-Billings calls an omnibus explanation for everything that young people and families do and experience. Such claims are dangerous not only because they distort our sense of people, but because they make getting to know actual people seem unnecessary. Such claims also distance speakers from what those we describe as if they are fundamentally other types of human beings rather than complex people trying to thrive in specific or often shared contexts, just like us. And in schools, such claims overlook the many opportunity factors and people involved in students' outcomes, including educators themselves. Just to kind of continue here. Here's the problem with shallow culture talk. Much about the talk about racial, ethnic, national origin, or class cultures in schools just sums up communities assume behaviors, experience, norms, or values based on too little information, and then uses those assumptions to quickly explain people in the community. This happens because when people are describing cultures they don't belong to and these claims block further learning. Indeed, as a teacher educator, Gloria Latson-Billings noticed that the new, mostly white, middle-class, monolingual Midwesterner teachers, because she's from Wisconsin, right? That's where she taught at. Midwesterner teachers that she was working with made lots of cultural assumptions about the low-income students of color they were meeting, while they didn't see themselves as culturally shaped at all. Unable to see students or themselves clearly, they blocked inquiry to improve in their own work. So I'll stop there to say that it's really important that you as a person understand that you have bias, but you are a cultural being that has been shaped by culture. And if you are not unpacking who you are and the culture that you come from, it might be hard for you. You might make over simplistic claims about people that you are looking at because you don't see how you have been culturally shaped as a person throughout time. And so this is something that's really, really paramount when you're reviewing applications, that you have bias and that you are culturally shaped, and that the person that you're reading is also culturally shaped. And maybe there is a cultural mismatch, which is okay. But this is why it's important for you to have these conversations within your group, because when we make overly simplistic claims, that affects the outcomes of people. And if we are not aware of the biases that we have, we don't even know how we are shaping people's livelihoods every day. So a few things, 2 slides, and we'll get out of this, right? Strategies to use, really important for you to challenge nouns, right? So when people say stuff, ask them, what do you mean by that? Also to challenge words. Again, what do you mean when you say this? Emphasize that no group lives in a bubble, right? No group of people are monolithic. I'm looking for the word monolithic, right? We are different people, even within group, out of group, right? We're all different people. There's no monolithic group of people. So it's really important that to really emphasize the individual, especially when we're thinking about reviewing scholarships and applications. And that remember that human beings share behaviors across cultural groups, right? Do not imagine cultures as overly different. Instead, learn more about shared experiences as well as different ones. Lastly, here, how can you mitigate bias during the scholarship review process? The few things that are here is recognize your biases. Please, please, I beg of thee, recognize your bias. We all have bias, right? And don't just say like, well, I have bias. Acknowledge it and move forward with it. Acknowledge it and do something with it. You need to take actionable steps after. Analyze your assumptions, right? What assumptions that you're making about this student, this candidate, this application, right? Acknowledge them. Lastly, here, be open-minded. That's really, 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 really important. Having an open mind means being receptive towards different opinions, regardless if they conflict with yours or not. Often, closed-mindedness leads to biases like stereotyping, which reflects badly on one's judgment. Practicing humility will help in recognizing everyone's true worth despite their race, gender, nationality, or ethnicity, allowing for informed opinion rather than making biased assumptions fueled by external factors. I will pause there for questions.
All right. Yes, we do have a few questions in chat. The first one was from Sabrina, curious, and that may be applying to us on the scholarship committee. She was curious if corrections are applied to reviewer ratings to address differences in consistency. So
I'll answer.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, Reviewer, the platform actually did come out recently with a report that does exactly that. It looks at the reviewers' trends in scoring. And so we can pull the actual data that is entered by you, but then we're going to pull this report to show if they were to put in these, to run this report that made it more consistent based on the trends for the individual scoring overall. Not to be closed-minded, but I don't always trust the technology. So I want to see where our scores come before we just accept what they come through with their report. So that is something that is on our radar to watch.
Great. And we had a question for Allison. I do think this is for Dr. Gotch and Dr. Gilmore. I'm new to the process, but discussion about underinformed portion is a bit confusing. Aren't we rating based on the information we are given? Isn't that the applicant's job to make sure we have the information to assess for this purpose? How can we handle the underinformed piece in this process?
So I think that's a really great question. And yes, right. And I hear your question. It's very pragmatic, right? Isn't it the applicant's job? Yes. Yes, I would say yes, period. But we also come into this context as people, right? And so we also come in with our own biases and understandings and how we understand certain circumstances of the information that we are given. So it's really important to understand who you are as well, too. Yes, in your opinion, right? Maybe a student does a good job or a bad job, but maybe that's your view. But someone might see that that's totally different. I think what's really important when we think about reviewing applications is, at least I would do in my practice, is to at least give two read-throughs, right? So read the applications, the applicant for one time, look at it, and maybe put it away for a little bit. And like think about it. It's like, and then come back to it again. It's like, do I still have the same understanding, the same assessment of this person? Because sometimes you might not even be in the best mood. Maybe you're hungry. Maybe you're running late. Maybe the dog needs to go on a walk. And you're like, oh, snap, I don't really have time. I'm not giving enough time and energy to this application. So I would say, like, even come back a second time, be like, do I still see the student in the same light? Did they do a good job of explaining the content? So just even giving more time and more grace to really take in all the information. Chad?
Yeah, I think you know, one thing to add to that, maybe I'm trying to play off of your idea of cleaning your lenses, or maybe it's even like blinders. And if I'm understanding what you're presenting today correctly, that underinformed idea, so if we take leadership, maybe uh, if you have underinformed explanations, you could be missing aspects of leadership that's in somebody's writing. So they did communicate it to you, but you have to maybe think beyond those first things that came to mind, like in the exercise today, when you thought about what a leader is and like what the specific things that a leader does are. And maybe there's other things that are equally leadership-like. And having your kind of radar tuned to those things, or checking your glasses, like, I'm not seeing leadership here. Am I missing something? Am I reading things in a particular way because, of how I'm responding to other aspects of the application, perhaps? I don't know if that's accurate, Amir.
Yes.
Thank you. Roxanne put together a list of things that the association has done to really help address some of these things that you brought up today, and thank you so much for doing that. One of them is to help us think outside the box of what leadership typically looks like. Community service, if you are the captain of your team, if you are the president of your organization, but it goes so much beyond that. And so I think that's something that as reviewers, we need to focus on too, is looking at the leadership they're exhibiting. It may not look like how we think it should, but they are definitely being leaders in these areas that are different than what we've come up with in the past. And in the handbook that we provided, there is a word bank to help our students think about that as well, because they don't even see themselves as leaders in certain areas because it's not that title. Well, leadership isn't a title, it's your action. And so that's really something to think about through this. I think in their example may be very different from what you experienced or what you've run in other students' applications. But for this individual, their demonstration of leadership is what we're evaluating. And to help with that, the rubrics that the committee put together this year, they're very thorough and they're kind of deep, and but to take the time and really go through them is going to help us with that scoring so that we are absolutely identifying the highest qualified students based on their leadership abilities. And I will share that list out for the sake of time. And I want to say thank you so much to Dr. Gilmore, Dr. Gotch for joining us today. Really good information. I will share out the PowerPoint, the recording, and then also the list that we put together of the things that we've done from the association side to really help improve our process to make sure that we are being transparent and fair in the selection of our scholarship students. If you need to go for it. If not, and you want to stick around and ask any other questions, we have a couple minutes here. But thank you again so much for joining us today.
So Jamaica, we had a question from Lynn D. Alexander. Great question for us. I can answer that if you like, or you can, how we were addressing the use of Chat GPT based on last year.
Yeah, so this year we did add a disclosure into the application that says if you're going to use it, you better give credit because you can't just plagiarize other people's. And if they don't give credit, we're working on resources to help identify, kind of to show what has been used from ChatGPT or any other type of AI, and then really reinforcing to the students. We want to get to know the student themselves, not what the computer thinks that the student is like. And so we did that in there, and we're hoping with even just that disclaimer that we'd prefer you not use it, but if you do, give credit. And if we find that you did use it and didn't give credit, you may disqualify yourself from the awards. And we'll do with those on an application by application basis as you're going through them.
Jamaica, has there been any thought around the adding for the applicants to do like a personal video or something to that effect that might cut some of that out, that you really get to see the whole, obviously Amir, that comes into different biases as well, a different layer, but you get to see that person as a person, instead of a piece of paper and words.
I think you answered.
Jamaica, I can jump in. So that certainly has been a consideration, and it came up as part of the discussion around accessibility and having multimodal opportunities for students to submit that initial application. We do still have the interview process, so students are still going to have, reviewers will still have that in-person or Zoom interface with students where students won't have those interview questions in advance. So there will be that, evaluation of the students speaking from their experience, although they're still talking about leadership. It's not like it's a different topic. They've written about it, but you'll be able to hear it directly from the students. And the questions for the interview are complementary to the written application, so it won't be duplicative.
I guess to jump in, I mean, I don't know, right? Obviously, you're adopting, AI policy of what WSU is saying. I'm looking at what Al and Barbara are also saying. I think even as you review as a group, I think even people have different dispositions even about AI use, right? And Chat GPT. And so that might be a conversation even in group of like, how do y'all feel about Chat GPT? Because even as a professor, I'm like on the odd man out on Chat GPT and AI, but like I have professors that love it, right? And so I think again, having those conversations in group about like its use, its implementation is also going to be really important as you review those applications.
That is a great.
This is Al Powell. I teach a graduate course in technology and society, and the assumption I make is that students will use AI. And it's not a direct fit here, but I ask students to add a paragraph at the end of each paper explaining if they used AI and how and why. So I think we're going to get applications that use AI as part of the writing process, but I think that that also levels the field for weaker writers. So to some degree, I think we need to check our bias about the use of AI in writing and consider that not an indictment of the writer. I'm done.
No, I think that's fair. And I was being very precise in my example with the halo effect. I think I said something like clumsy use of AI. I think we maybe what prompted the question. I mean, we see it sometimes in admissions applications, just that kind of fuzzy, like the substance isn't there. They've been able to use AI to write something that has all the trappings of a good letter, but doesn't actually deliver on the substance.
Your great points. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the group today? Again, thank you so much for all of your time today. Extra thank you again to Dr. Gotch and Dr. Gilmore for giving up their time and speaking with us. And if we will follow up this week with the recordings, PowerPoints, and next steps for the selection committee. So thank you all so much and have a great day. Go Cougs.
Thank you so much. Go Cougs.